This tutorial is going to teach you how to transform an old pair of jeans into this pleated miniskirt. This is a hand sewing project, so no sewing machine is required. We'll be using backstitch as our hand sewing technique, so if you don't know this or you'd like a refresher, please do go watch our other tutorial on this. This is the pair of jeans I'm going to be using. Make sure you choose one that fits around your waist and hips, as these measurements are going to be unchanged, but any different styles, skinny, straight, flare, will all work. This is the equipment I'm going to be using. I've got some hemming tape or hemming web, and you want something 1 to 2 centimeters wide. I've got pins, some small scissors, a ruler, some Tailor's chalk or a pencil or a water-soluble pen will be fine, a pair of larger sharp scissors and an unpicker, these plastic clips which are a nice alternative to pins but are not an essential, and some hand sewing needles which I keep in one of these little felt books. The first thing to do is lay your jeans flat and start unpicking the crotch, and you want to go from the bottom of the pockets on the back all the way around to the bottom of the fly zip on the front. So use the sharp end of your unpicker to lift up each of the individual threads and then push it through to the cutting end of the unpicker, and that will slice each one of your threads. This can be quite fiddly as some jeans have some really thick layers to get through, so just take your time and gently prise apart those 2 layers of fabric. Once you get through the lines of stitching, you'll start to have a hole like this, and I'm also going to continue unpicking down both of the inside legs for about 10 centimeters from the crotch down the inside leg. This is what you're aiming for, and you'll want to do this on both of the legs. Once you've done that, you want to continue unpicking the back seam so that it's in line with the bottom of the back pockets. You then want to cross one of your panels of fabric over the top of the other one so that when we turn it into a skirt, it's going to sit flat. Grab your pins, and we're going to manipulate those 2 pieces of unpicked fabric so they sit as flat as possible, and then pin this new seam in place. Be careful that you're not pinning all the way through to the front of the jeans. You just want to be using these 2 back pieces, so you can put your hand inside the jeans to make sure that you're just going through this layer rather than all the way through. Using 2 pins to do this should be enough. Adjust your pin placement until you're happy that the jeans are sitting flat. Next, we're going to flip the jeans over and do the same thing on the front. So I've unpicked the crotch all the way up to the bottom of the fly zip, and now I'm going to cross one piece of fabric over the other and pin that into place. Make sure that you're only pinning through the front layers of fabric rather than the back by putting your hands inside the jeans. Once again, I'll use 2 pins to hold this in place. Next, we're going to cut the legs off the jeans, and in order to do that, we need a line to follow. Use your ruler to measure a 5 centimeter line from the bottom of the fly zip and draw a mark with your Tailor's chalk, pencil or soluble pen. Next, we're going to draw a line parallel to the back of the jeans. Draw this on one side, and then we want to measure how far down the side seam our new line crosses. So measure from the top of the jeans. I've had to grab a measuring tape here because my ruler wasn't long enough. I can see that my line crosses the side seam at 33 centimeters, and I want to match that on the other side, so I'm going to mirror the mark I've made on the other side. Next, pick up your ruler again, and you want to join up the mirrored mark and the first parallel line that you made. Next, make sure that your jeans are sat super flat, and we're going to cut off the legs of the jeans following the line that we've just made, cutting through both layers, the front and the back, at the same time. Where the denim is thicker particularly, you might have to move a bit slower with your scissors. Now we're going to start sewing, so choose a thread that matches the thread that's already used on your jeans and thread your needle. We're going to begin our line of stitching on the inside of the jeans, and we're going to start in line with the bottom of the fly zip. As usual, we'll start by over sewing 3 times in the same place, and throughout this whole skirt project we're only going to be using backstitch. Once you've done your over sewing and anchored your stitch, push your needle through to the front of the jeans. The aim here is to create a new line of stitching to replace the one that you unpicked. Use your back stitch and try and match the existing stitch length to make this look as neat as possible, and follow the line all the way down to the raw edge of the jeans where you've cut them. This does require some patience as it can take a bit of time, particularly as you're sewing through quite a few layers of fabric here, but try and keep it as neat as possible, as this is going to be visible on the front of your skirt. Once you've reached the edge of the fabric, secure your line of stitches with 3 oversews on the inside so it's not visible on the front. This is what my finished line of stitching looks like, and you can see that I actually unpicked 2 lines of stitching, so I'm going to do a back stitch down that second one as well. It's not necessary for the function of the skirt, but I just want it to look finished and professional. The next thing to do is turn the skirt over and sew the same 2 line of stitches on the back. So same as before, we're going to start our stitching on the inside, so do your 3 anchor stitches on the inside. You want to overlap with the remaining stitches that you haven't unpicked yet by 1 to 2 centimeters, and this will just make sure that that line of stitching isn't going to come undone. Continue your back stitch all the way down to the raw edge of your jeans where you cut them and finish off with an anchor stitch. Then repeat the line of stitching over the second seam that you unpicked, so you have 2 uniform lines. Next, we're going to move on to making the pleats for the skirt, and we're going to use the 2 legs that we cut off to do this. First, use your big scissors to cut down the inside of both of the legs as close as you can to the side seam. You'll then be left with 2 big rectangles. From these rectangles, we're going to cut 3 strips. I've made mine 10 centimeters wide, so I'm measuring 10 centimeters from that remaining seam and making a mark. I'm now going to join up all those marks together. If you want your skirt to be slightly longer, then increase the 10 centimeter measurement, and if you want it to be shorter, then decrease the 10 centimeter measurement. The length of the strips is going to be the length of the legs of your jeans. This side of the jeans isn't quite big enough to fit 2 of my 10 centimeter strips side by side, so I'm flipping over and marking out my second long strip on the other side. Now you can cut out these rectangles, and I'm going as close as I can to the side seam, and then for the other rectangle I'll go as close as I can on the other side of the side seam so that my strip is still 10 centimeters wide and as long as the leg of the trousers. The next thing to do is to cut a 3rd rectangle from the other trouser leg. And here are my finished 3. If the waistband on your skirt is above around a size 16, or the length of your trousers are shorter, for example if they're cropped jeans, then you probably want to cut 4 rectangles out here instead of 3, just so the ring of pleats that will go around the skirt is slightly longer. Next, move to the end of your rectangles and mark a 1 centimeter line along the small edge, and then join up these marks with a straight line. Then repeat this process on the other 2 rectangles, or the other 3 if you're using 4 rectangles in total. We're going to hand sew these rectangles together into one big long rectangle. So first pin 2 of the ends together by putting right sides together, and then either using your clips or pins attach these 2 together. Then move to the end of this strip and attach it to the start of the next one, and repeat the process. Hand sew along these lines with your back stitch, so then you have one big long rectangle attached together, but don't close up the final 2, so it's still an open rectangle rather than a closed loop. To make the hemming process slightly faster, we're going to use the hemming tape. This is a webbing that will melt once it's ironed and stick the 2 sides together. So rather than having to sew our entire hem, we're going to iron on the hemming tape. So roll out the hemming tape along the edge of your long rectangle, and then we're going to fold up the denim by 1 centimeter. So we have a 1 centimeter fold over itself, and I'm going to sandwich the hemming web in between these 2 layers of denim and pin it in place. Make sure to use pins rather than the plastic clips, as we're going to be ironing over the top of these pins. Keep rolling out the hemming tape all the way along the edge of your long rectangle, and put a new pin in around every 8 centimeters so that it's nice and secure. Once you get to the point that you've sewn 2 rectangles together, you want to flatten out that seam and then fold up the hemming web and then pin it into place, just like this. Once you finish all the pins, move over to your ironing board. The aim here is to melt the hemming web so that the 2 layers of denim are fused together. You can iron straight onto your metal pins and then remove the pins as you go. Using steam from the iron really helps activate the hemming web, so that's useful to do as you go along to make sure it's sticking. The key thing here is not to get the hemming tape melted onto your iron, so just make sure that it's tucked fully under your fold, and you might need to use your fingers to manipulate this just as you go along, making sure not to burn your fingers. Once you get to the seam where you've joined together two rectangles, just press this flat as well as you go. When you've gone all the way along and removed all the pins, the finish looks really crisp and neat. Now we're going to mark out where the folds of the pleats are going to go. So pick up your ruler and use it to mark alternating distances of 4 centimeters and then 7 centimeters. So the first one is 4, and then plus 7 takes me to 11, and then I'll go back to doing a 4 and then a 7. And I'll do this all the way along, so distances of 4 centimeters, then 7 centimeters, all the way along my long rectangle. Once you reach the end, we're going to pin the pleats into place so we can iron them down. To start with, I'm going to skip the first two measurements of 4 and 7 centimeters and start on the second measurement of 4 centimeters. I'll fold this over on itself and pin it into place just like this. Then you leave the measurement of 7 centimeters and jump to the next 4 centimeter measurement and fold this again in half on itself and pin it into place with the metal pins. Repeat this process all the way along your long rectangle. Once that's finished, move over to your ironing board again, and we're going to press each of these pleats into place just to make sure that our sewing is much easier and they remain super flat. And this is what your finished pleats will look like. Now is for the really exciting part of pinning the pleats onto the skirt. So I've got the part of the jeans that we worked on earlier and put it the right way in. And I'm going to put the pleats along the bottom of it, upside down and back to front, so both of the right sides of the fabric are facing each other, so the right sides are together. When we folded the pleats, we left the first 4 centimeter markation without pinning or folding it. I'm going to line up that mark with the outside seam of the top of the jeans. I'll then remove the pin from the pleats and then use that to attach the pleat to the skirt itself. You can see a close-up here of how that actually works. So take the pin out of the pleat and then replace it through that same point, but also going through one layer of the skirt. You want to continue this all the way around the skirt, making sure the pleats in the bottom of the skirt are in line. And this is what it will look like when you've gone all the way around. And now I'm going to sort out the two ends that need joining together, because I've got a circular skirt, but with a rectangle of pleats that needs to also be a closed loop. So I'll go back to where I started doing my pinning and fold back that small overhang that I have, which is that first 4 centimeters. The amount that you'll have coming around from the other side does depend on the length of your trousers and the waistband of your skirt, so yours could be slightly different. But what you want to do is join up these two sections so that you'll then have a closed loop of pleats to go around the bottom of your skirt. So I've used one pin at the bottom, and then you can see close up here that I'm going to put a second pin in the top of the pleat, and I can see that I've done the pleats correctly because it now sits flush with the skirt. Use your ruler to draw a straight line between those two pins that we've just put in, and we're going to hand sew along that line to attach these two ends of the rectangles together so we have a closed loop of pleats. My back stitch has made this really secure, and I'm going to use my big scissors to cut off the excess pleats, leaving about 1 centimeter just outside my back stitch, and I'll attach that final section to the skirt so it sits flat. To prepare for our final part of hand sewing, I'm going to make 1 centimeter marks all the way around the bottom of the skirt that I'm going to then sew along. So join up all these marks with your ruler and you'll have a straight line that looks like this. And now I'm going to back stitch all the way along that line, which will be the full circumference of the skirt. This will take some time, so just be patient, maybe do it sitting in front of the TV, but just make sure that you stay as close to that line as possible like this so that your skirt is definitely going to be straight when you wear it. The final thing to do is just to press it flat. So I've taken my skirt over to my ironing board and I'm going to press down that final seam. If you do happen to have access to an overlocker or a serger, this is a seam that you could do here, but it's not essential. And this is the skirt finished. I absolutely love this piece and I'm super excited to see yours. If you have any questions while you're going along, please do feel free to reach out. We'd love to help.